I'm Dr. Ryan DeBell from the Move and Fix. This is
Move and Fix Mondays.
And I'm here with Dr. Dan Pope at Champion Physical Therapy and Performance.
Yep.
What are we gonna talk about in this video, Dan?
Oh, we got so much cool stuff. Looks like you have a spine in your hand though. Tell me about that.
So what we're gonna talk about is a very common complaint with squatting, which is pinching or sensitivity in the front or crease of the hip, like at the bottom of the squat, or what some people explain it as, like the feeling of tightness.
Yeah.
And if you look at the pelvis, you can see the socket of the joint here. And there's a lot of structures that kind of run through this area. You have obviously actually the joint itself, and then there's the tendon of the rectus femoris. You were mentioning the tendon of the TFLs in the area as well. And so if you go like this when you're squatting, there can be some sensitivity of, whatever tissue it is. What we want to figure out though and talk about in this video is what modifications can we look at when someone does complain of those things so that they can still train their legs without irritating whatever is being irritated.
Yep.
So one of the most common things first to think about is just stance and foot position. Mm-hmm. There isn't necessarily like a stance that's going to be the best for every person that you could say broadly applies, because there can be differences in hip joint anatomy. Stance and lever arms, I mean, physics is like a big deal. So you can't always just say like it has to be this way. So the first thing I would try if someone said, oh, I have this pain or pinching or tightness in front of my hip, is I would say, okay, why don't we play around with two variables in the squat? The degree of toe out, and then also the width. So I would try different widths with different degrees of toe out. And as long as the knees aren't diving in and the low back isn't rounding, if we can find a variation in the squat, in the stance position that allows for pain-free squatting, I'm gonna test that. And that's what I would go with. That's not always the case though. You can't always find that, as you know. Yeah,
I will say, I don't want to cut you off, but a lot of athletes have a lot of pinching from the hips.
Yeah.
If you just modify the squat, a lot of times it's like a magic trick.
Yeah.
And they don't have pain anymore.
So you're changing the mechanics in some way that's making that go away.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider too is, now your spiny isn't as bendable as my spiny.
My spiny or?
If you're really extended in your low back, you're going to essentially run out of space sooner. And a lot of people start their squat very arched. And what we can do is take the back from being really arched into not flexion, but more neutral. So show us what that looks like. So by slightly rotating the pelvis and then locking that in and squatting, that can change the position of the hip socket enough to sometimes make squatting pain-free just by making that little tweak. Okay, so those are more like positional and setup tweaks. That doesn't always get rid of it though.
No.
So there has to be some other actual like modifications. So what's the first one that you would do?
So I like to modify depth a little bit. So if we're going into a deep squat and we go down deep enough, as soon as we pass a certain level, we might start getting more irritation of those structures we're talking about. Yeah. So if we just limit your depth a little bit, we can get less irritation. Sometimes you eliminate the pain completely. So a real easy thing to do is something like a, whoa, box, we put that there. Anyway, let's have you try a box squat here. I know you know how to do this. Is there any
particular way you want me to set this up?
Well,
I'll go this way from the side.
There we go. Good.
So this box probably, you'd want a larger surface area most likely. This box isn't ideal, but
you got it. And
so
also,
I'd go down.
Yep. And then right back up again. Good. And guys, coaches, I would say that the modifications you first want to try to do is modify the stance, right? Make sure it's not bothering people. And then, yeah.
Too excited.
Malfunction, yeah. So modify the stance, all right? Modify the pelvic position. That's still not working. We're thinking about depth. So this is kind of our third step here.
Okay.
So go ahead and squat again for me. So you can see, because we have the box here, we're just not going quite as deep. And we have less aggravation of the hip joint at this point.
But does the rep still count?
I don't know.
Do I still get a training effect if I don't go all the way down?
Yeah, well, obviously.
It sounds like a silly question, but.
You do, you get a training effect.
You can still train without going down to the very depths of the squat.
Yeah, for sure.
So I like changing the height of the box to find the lowest depth that someone can do with zero pain.
You got it.
Like that's how I approach it. So sometimes that may be even higher than this.
Yes.
And that may be the option.
Yep.
And then I'd lower it, but no pain, right?
No pain.
That's the rule for that.
You got it.
So lower it as much as you can with no pain.
You got it.
Okay.
The other thing we didn't quite mention yet is something like a back squat here versus a front squat where you're more upright. It's a different angle at the hip. So if I descend in a front squat, the angle is a little bit different than if I'm in a back squat, my hips are really far back. I end up getting more of my femur coming up against the socket. So sometimes just changing the squat variation can also help. It's not necessarily a box squat, but a front squat.
And a lot of times athletes will say that too. They're like, I don't know, when I do back squats, it bugs me, but like front squats, I feel fine.
Yeah.
And it seems like this really confusing thing. But if you consider the mechanics and like the angles of load and things like that, it makes sense why one would be pain-free and the other might be a little bit irritated.
You got it, yep.
And then there's some like split variations we could do as well, right? Like split squats, I think, are very underutilized when someone is having this kind of discomfort. They go, I need to find a way to squat. Well, you really need to just find a way to train your legs without irritating yourself. So what's your favorite split squat variant?
Well, I love split squats in general. I think lunges are great, step-ups are great. Let's just go over a typical split squat.
Okay, so
with
like
no
elevation front or back.
Yeah.
So I would just be here.
Yep, and then go ahead and descend with the knee down towards the floor. Good, and then come right back up again.
I think the biggest issue people have with this is going here too much in the front, like they go too far forward versus thinking about going more down. Would you agree?
I would agree.
And then how much are you pushing like front versus back leg?
I like to think about 50-50.
Okay, you go 50-50?
So both, yeah.
Nice, okay.
It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to train the front leg a little more, then you can maybe lean a little bit more towards that front leg.
Yeah.
Or if you want to try to split through the center and get more carry or something like a split jerk per se, I think you're better going straight down the pike and back up.
Yeah, one thing that I see a lot is people will complain of like maybe pain in the back knee, and that's when they're pushing way too hard in the back leg.
Yeah.
So I say, what percentage are you going? They're like, oh, I'm pushing mostly out of the back leg. So we want to be like 50-50 or biased towards the front leg.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's some things to try when someone says, oh, I have this irritation in front of my hips with squatting. We can think about stance and positioning. We can think about pelvic positioning.
Yep.
Look at depth with the box squat. We could consider different, like back squat versus front squat and how that changes the loading. And then split squat is always a great option.
You got it.
And there's many other things to be doing as well. You can think about looking at ankles. I mean, well beyond what we can cover in one video, but those are some options that you can use for yourself or with people that you work with if they're complaining of this. And essentially isn't just all of these things are really just stressing the tissue that's irritated.
Yeah.
So like changing the depth of the squat is, you're training the muscles but without stressing that thing in that particular way. So anyways, all right, so I think that's what we got for you guys for this week on Movement Fix Monday. If you don't already follow Dan on Instagram, you can find him at FitnessPainFree, and you can follow me at The Movement Fix. We'll see you guys next week.